Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast. Today, we are taking on a titan, a truly monumental work that demands not just reading, but some deep philosophical excavation. We're talking about the sweeping, complex world of Leo Tolstoy, and we're diving into the early formative years of his epic narrative. We're charting a course through 19th century Russian society, the profound philosophical shifts of the era, and the brutal collision of individual ambition with the forces of history and war. Our sources are incredibly rich, pulling us directly into the drawing rooms and battlefields where the fate of Europe and maybe the soul of man are decided.
And our mission today is pretty critical. You can see this as a shortcut, but not a superficial one. We're aiming to understand the essential architecture of this world, the political commentary, the shifting sands of human character, and the really radical life philosophy that emerges from all the chaos. We are charting a course through this incredibly detailed territory to grasp the central statements and insights that Leo Tolstoy embedded right in these first societal interactions and military skirmishes. These early chapters, they really establish the rules of a universe where everything must ultimately be tested against simplicity and truth.
Before we jump into the social world of 1805, let's pause for a second and just ground ourselves in the man who wrote this. I mean, the life trajectory of Leo Tolstoy is arguably as dramatic as any of his fiction. He starts out as this privileged, sometimes pretty dissolute society author, but he undergoes this radical, almost painful transformation. He becomes a nonviolent spiritual anarchist, and this personal evolution, it just deeply informs every single word he wrote later in life.
It absolutely does. And his ideological shift wasn't abstract at all. It was fueled by these core, pivotal, and frankly, traumatic experiences. The single most defining event he often cited happened in Paris in 1857. He witnessed a public execution. He described that moment as utterly barbaric, a profound psychological scar. Seeing that kind of institutionalized murder, the calculated, ritualized violence carried out in the name of the state, it just shattered his faith in secular authority.
Right. And what was the philosophical fallout of a trauma like that?
Well, it led to his deep-seated, lifelong conviction that the state was fundamentally corrupt. He famously concluded that the state is a conspiracy designed not only to exploit, but above all, to corrupt its citizens. For Tolstoy, the greatest lie was this notion that government required his loyalty or his participation, and that led to his lasting vow. He would never serve any government anywhere. He would reject its legitimacy entirely.
So that concept of nonviolence ahimsa, that becomes the cornerstone of his whole ethical system, right? It ties his political anarchism directly to his spiritual beliefs.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how global his influences were. His views on nonviolence were solidified, kind of unexpectedly, by reading a German translation of the Tirukkural. It's a classic work of Tamil literature that emphasizes ethics and love. This merging of Eastern philosophy with his own Christian interpretation became hugely influential.
And this wasn't just him thinking to himself, was it? This radicalized concept of non-resistance had tangible global consequences.
Monumental ones. It was Tolstoy's influential essay, A Letter to a Hindu, that was so important. He wrote it while he was corresponding with a young, aspiring activist who was seeking his guidance, a man named Mahatma Gandhi. And that letter really instilled the concept of nonviolent resistance in him. I mean, think about that lineage for a second. You have a Russian count traumatized by state violence in Paris who reads an ancient Indian text which ultimately inspires the modern freedom movement in India. It's a profound historical loop.
So his thinking wasn't just passive idealism. It led to a very defined form of Christian anarchist thought, which required pacifism.
Precisely. Because he believed following Christ required absolute pacifism, he had to become a philosophical anarchist. He founded the Tolstoyan movement, which promoted nonviolence, anti-urbanism, communal living, and crucially, opposition to the state.
Yeah.
But here's the ironic twist. Despite creating this whole movement, Tolstoy himself was deeply opposed to joining any organization or formal group. He remained a staunch individualist. He believed that spiritual truth could only be held by the individual conscience, not, codified by committees.
That paradox shaping a global movement while rejecting the very concept of organization, that seems to perfectly encapsulate the contradiction at the heart of his work, this tension between human institutions and individual truth. Okay, so let's leave that grand philosophical scale for a moment and shrink our focus down to the initial microcosm of Russian high society in 1805. Anna Pavlovna's soiree. This setting is so much more than a party. It's a meticulously choreographed performance, a strategic staging ground, and a perfect barometer for the political and social mood.
That salon is the novel's entry point, and it shows us all the rules of the game. Anna Pavlovna, the hostess, she's the master conductor. She manages the flow of conversation with what the text calls courtly and feminine dexterity. Her whole life is focused on this management. She is constantly steering her guests away from anything too sensitive like, God forbid, any criticism of the Empress Mother, because maintaining that social lubrication is her sole purpose. It reveals the absolute, invisible power structure of the court. Even indirect criticism of the center of power is instantly deemed socially corrosive.
It sounds utterly exhausting and completely focused on artifice and, well, connections.
It is entirely about maintaining appearances and reinforcing social linkage. Every single arrival is a statement. The introduction of guests like Prince Ippolit or the obligatory introduction of the little old lady, the aunt who appears from an adjoining room, these aren't spontaneous human exchanges. No, they're demonstrations of who knows whom, reinforcing the rigid hierarchy. She flies her gaze from one important connection to the next, just orchestrating this theatrical scene where everyone has to play a role.
And it's right in this environment that we meet Prince Vasily, who is the quintessential example of the powerful elite.
Prince Vasily represents pure, cold calculation and influence peddling. His behavior is immediately mercenary. We see this with Princess Drubetskaja. She is poor but well-born, and she intercepts him at the soiree for one reason only, to secure a transfer for her son Boris into the prestigious guards. She employs all her former feminine wiles to manipulate Vasily, and it just lays bare how desperation and raw necessity are driving the interactions beneath that polished, superficial surface of high society.
And then the explosion. Pierre Bizikov, the true outsider, walks in.
Pierre is such a powerful physical and social contrast to everyone else in that room. He's described as a strong young man, physically larger than everyone present, awkward and wearing spectacles. He's the illegitimate son of the famous, dying Count Bezukov. He holds no formal office, and he's just gotten back from being educated abroad. Anna Pavlovna greets him with worry and fear, viewing him, as the text states, as someone who is in the wrong place. He is a definite social misfit, and his presence just introduces this instability into her carefully balanced room.
And we see his intellectual side almost immediately, which Anna Pavlovna views as an immediate threat to her social order.
Oh, absolutely. She catches him discussing philosophy with the Abbe Morio, and this demonstrates that Pierre's intellectual passion is just too raw, too potentially disruptive for a place where appearances are everything. She swiftly separates them, wanting to better observe them, almost as though they were volatile chemicals. She needs to ensure intellect doesn't override the required emotional tenor of the room.
Standing apart from both the calculating Vasily and the awkward Pierre is Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. What does his demeanor reveal about Tolstoy's initial critique of the aristocracy?
Andrei is the ideal nobleman on the surface. Handsome, young, sharp features, married to the lively, visibly pregnant little Princess Lisa. But everything about him projects this aura of disdain. He has this constant, tired, bored look, suggesting he is already utterly weary of society. He is over it.
So over it.
Over the gossip, over the performance. His measured gait and dismissive air contrast so sharply with his vibrant wife. Tolstoy uses Andrei to establish the spiritual bankruptcy that exists even within the most highly regarded social positions.
And then the salon ignites into this political firestorm focused on Napoleon, which is really the ideological litmus test for the whole chapter.
It's a chorus of uniform contempt. It has to be. Anna Pavlovna initiates it by calling the Milan coronation a comedy of the crowning in Milan. She views Napoleon's assumption of power as just outright madness. The collective stance is that Napoleon is a revolutionary upstart who violates all the natural laws of monarchy.
And the Vicomte reinforces this, right? Championing the exiled Bourbon cause and criticizing the European sovereigns for doing nothing for Louis XVI and then having the gall to congratulate the throne usurper.
This collective contempt is the required high society script. But then Pierre, the outsider, commits the ultimate social offense. He interrupts, uninvited, to defend Napoleon and the revolution.
He argues that the power was given by the people to free them from the Bourbons, and he sees the revolution as a great deed. He embraces the very principles that this high society fears most.
And Anna Pavlovna immediately tries to shut him down. She equates revolution and regicide as completely unacceptable for polite conversation. She tries to redirect him to a far less important table. This scene is so crucial for understanding Tolstoy's view of this world. High society is a place where genuine political passion, especially if it challenges the established order, is instantly suppressed and deemed vulgar. And Prince Andrei, sensing the overwhelming awkwardness, uses this as his cue to escape, which just compounds Pierre's sense of isolation. So if the salon showed us the hypocrisy of the external world, The moments immediately following that soiree expose the deep internal rot of frustration that Prince Andrei is experiencing.
Yeah, his bitterness is palpable. He talks about Bonaparte being free and pursuing his goal, and he contrasts this with his own life, which he feels is chained to a woman. He sees Lisa, his wife, not as a partner, but as an impediment to his ambition.
He describes his current existence as being trapped in a bewitched circle of salons, gossip, balls, and just pointless vanity. For Andrei, the freedom of war, even though he admits he understands nothing about it, represents the only acceptable escape from this stagnant life. He is desperate for glory because his current life has no internal meaning. He's defining his life entirely by external achievement.
And in stark contrast to Andrei's bitter, rigid, aristocratic world, we shift immediately to the warmth and explosive youthful chaos of the Rostov family.
The Rostov house is such a breath of fresh, disorganized air. It's full of this suppressed cheerfulness and joy that's just radiating from the younger generation. Boris, Nikolai, Sonja, Natasha, and Petya. This is a world entirely separate from the formal, judgmental adult sphere. It is pure, messy, emotional life force.
And this energy is really idealistic. Nikolai, for instance, he rejects the idea that he is joining the military just out of friendship.
He insists he feels a profound vocation of a soldier. This is pure, untested, idealized enthusiasm. And the emotional stakes are so high. We see Sonja weeping over Nikolai's imminent departure for war, a scene that Natasha watches with this intense focus, just absorbing the raw emotion.
And these intense, secret romantic entanglements are already forming, particularly between young Natasha and Boris.
Natasha, who is still just a child but brimming with this feminine power, forces Boris to kiss her doll. She then grabs his arms, holding him in this mix of triumph and anxiety alike, compelling him to affirm their connection forever, until death. This interaction, which is so much more emotional than any of the cold machinations at the soiree, reveals the raw, unrefined power of feeling that will later prove both beautiful and, well, destructive in the narrative.
But even this youthful bubble is pierced by the relentless cynicism of society, represented by the high-stakes inheritance plot surrounding Pierre Bezukhov's dying father, Count Bezukov.
This plot is where Tolstoy really shows us the naked avarice beneath society's veneer. Anna Mikhailovna, Boris's desperate mother, she views Prince Vasily as her main rival for the Count's massive fortune. She rushes to assure Vasily of her devotion to the uncle, suggesting the Count must be prepared for his final duty, confession, and last rites, using religious duty as a tool to secure her position near the dying man.
The other relatives, the Count's princesses, their certain Pierre, the illegitimate son, the butard, can't possibly inherit.
They hold on to this belief until Prince Vasily reveals the critical mechanism. The Count may have petitioned the Emperor to legitimize Pierre, which would make him the rightful heir to everything via testament. And suddenly the princesses shift from treating Pierre with this disdain like a sick person close to death, to fearing his potential ascendancy as the wealthiest man in Russia. The shift is immediate and, frankly, repulsive.
In this maelstrom of greed, there is a solitary voice of spiritual reflection. Princess Marja.
Marja represents the first true moral anchor we encounter. In a letter to her friend Julie, she expresses deep concern for Pierre, calling the great wealth a burden. She pointedly cites the biblical passage about the camel passing through the needle's eye, suggesting this fortune will only lead to temptation and sorrow. Her advice to Julie is equally telling. Avoid mystical books that create doubt, and instead focus on the simplicity of the Gospels, minimizing human intellect in favor of simple piety.
Her perspective suggests that true peace comes not from managing your circumstances, but from spiritual acceptance.
Exactly. She maintains peace by stating she will never allow herself to judge her father's soul. She views suffering as coming from God, not from people who are merely his instruments. This spiritual resignation, this idea that you find freedom by giving up the right to judge, is such a crucial philosophical counterpoint to the political machinations of the soiree and the desperation of the inheritance hunters.
And it directly informs her final interaction with her brother Andrei before he leaves for the front.
When Marja praises his wife Lisa, Andrei reacts with an ironic and dismissive expression. And Marja, attempting to offer some spiritual guidance, suggests he is suffering from a proud thought and urges him to pray for the love he currently lacks for his wife. She sees his misery as an internal failure of humility, not a circumstance imposed by Lisa. But Andrei, he remains fixated on the chains.
And his farewell to his father, the old Prince Bolkonsky, that just reinforces the brutal, rigid definition of duty in their aristocratic world.
The old prince praises Andrei for not clinging to a woman's skirt, asserting firmly, "Service comes before everything else." Duty and military service are the only acceptable paths to honor for the Bolkonskis. This sets Andrei up perfectly for his impending disappointment on the battlefield, where his lofty ideal of duty will confront the chaotic reality of war.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this deep dive. So now we follow Prince Andrei to the battlefield, the 1805 campaign, where we find the true collision of those lofty ideals, duty, and the messy reality of organized violence.
Andrei's initial engagement is very intellectual and ambitious. He's focused on the overall military picture, but he quickly realizes that half the Austrian campaign is already lost. He hears the details of the losses and he sees the incompetence. He fears Napoleon's genius. But in an act of deep psychological contradiction, he cannot bring himself to wish defeat upon his revered hero. He's chasing a mirror image of Napoleon, that glorious individual who controls history.
And that initial excitement of joining the greatest war quickly descends into confusion.
Oh, absolutely. The bureaucratic mess at headquarters, the political maneuvering behind the lines, it instantly undermines the idealized view of service. We see officers struggling to reconcile the military ideal with the reality. In Moscow, a colonel insists on fighting to the last drop of blood for the Tsar, urging little use of one's own reason. The military ideal demands unquestioning loyalty and sacrifice, the very system Tolstoy despises.
And young Nikolai Rostov, the enthusiastic hussar, he's perfectly built for this system.
Rostov's idealism is a perfect fit for the rigid military structure. He sees the regiment as a comforting deer house, where everything is clear and simple. This military clarity is a welcome escape from the confusing complexities of home life, the financial difficulties, the ambiguous relationships with Sonia and Dolokhov. He thrives precisely because the military demands simplicity of thought and action.
But the rigid structure can't protect him from the harsh realities of honor, finance, and betrayal.
No, it can't. We see his disastrous gambling loss to Dolokhov, a man depicted as having strong will, cleverness, and skill at cards. This loss forces Nikolai into a profound financial crisis, making him dependent on his father. It's a painful lesson that even in the regiment, the rules of civilian society, avarice, debt, and the pressure to maintain elite status, they still apply.
We also see the passionate but misguided sense of honor embodied by Denisov.
Denisov is a fascinating study in reckless justice. He attacks a supply officer, Teljanin, whom he recognized as the chief thief, responsible for stealing provisions meant for the common soldiers. Denisov strikes him for this moral offense, an act of passionate, impulsive honor. However, this act lands him in trouble with the authorities and forces him to submit to an operation. Tolstoy shows us that even righteous indignation, when it's expressed outside the rigid military code, is punished.
So the personal quest for glory drives the great battles. And Andrei's motivation is startlingly transparent, which really sets the stage for his major transformation.
Tolstoy pulls no punches here. Andrei confesses that he lives solely for glory and being loved by people. He admits he would sacrifice his entire family for a single minute of glory, obsessing over his personal Toulon moment, where he alone would win the battle amidst the inevitable confusion of commanders. This is the ultimate expression of the great man theory, that one individual genius can control the tides of history.
But this quest for external glory clashes so dramatically with the actual battlefield effectiveness of unexpected heroes, like Captain Tushin.
Tushin is the anti-Andrei. He is the quiet, unexpected hero, operating outside the formal command structure. General Bagration finds Tushin's battery completely exposed, yet performing miracles under fire. Tushin is so intensely focused on the task operating effectively without strict adherence to rules that he barely even registers the general's presence. His battery managed to burn the village, despite massive losses. Tolstoy demonstrates that true effectiveness and courage often reside in the unassuming, practical actions of men who are focused on the task, not the glory.
And Rostov's idealism takes a catastrophic, humiliating hit during a charge.
When he sees a French skirmisher approaching, Rostov, the brave hussar, is overwhelmed by pure, paralyzing fear. He runs like a hare pursued by dogs, throwing his pistol instead of firing. This raw, undeniable experience just shatters his self-perception. His internal value system, the belief that he was inherently brave, is destroyed by physical reality. It forces him to question who he truly is outside of the comforting structure of the regiment.
And the climax of this entire section, and the greatest turning point for Andrei, occurs at Austerlitz. This is the symbolic center of the entire initial conflict.
This is the moment where Tolstoy delivers his most profound insight. After seizing the battle flag and leading his men forward in his desperate quest for glory, Andrei is wounded and falls on the Pratzen Heights. Lying there, gazing up at the high heaven, that endless blue vastness, he is no longer tormented by the struggle for fame. He realizes that everything he previously understood and pursued, all that was comprehensible, the horizontal world of ambition, politics, and gossip, is trivial or nictic, and conversely, the incomprehensible, the celestial vastness above him, is the most important.
So he moves from the quest for external validation to a realization of vertical spiritual truth.
Exactly. Earthly ambition becomes utterly null and worthless in the face of infinity. All his years of seeking position, influence, and martial glory just vanish. He's reborn philosophically.
And then comes the famous encounter with Napoleon, which just heightens the contrast.
Napoleon, the very embodiment of the great man he idealized, inspects the captured Russian officers, calling André a jeune homme. And André contrasts the kindness shown by the emperor, who smiled and commanded the men to be cared for, with the small silver icon his sister Marja had given him. He's left with a profound question. Whom should he pray to? The indefinite, unreachable power, the vast, incomprehensible God he sensed in the sky, or the personal God of Princess Marja, the one represented by that physical, personal icon? This moment is really Tolstoy challenging whether spiritual truth must be institutionalized or if it is purely an individual, emotional realization.
After that shattering experience at Austerlitz, the narrative returns to Russia, where military defeat is immediately reframed through the prism of patriotic denial and, well, political spin.
Moscow just embraces the comforting narrative that the Russian troops were exceptionally brave, but the defeat was caused by the treason of the Austrians, or poor supplies, or the inexperience of the young Tsar. This immediate creation of convenient lies shows how society actively resists uncomfortable truths. Bagration is instantly elevated to a hero, a symbol of the simple Russian warrior, which is often used as an implicit critique of the General Kutuzov, who represents cautious wisdom over reckless heroism.
And we return now to Pierre, whose inherited wealth and lack of purpose continue to cause him personal disaster.
Pierre, still directionless, fueled by gambling and drinking, confronts Dolokhov over rumors concerning his wife Elena, and it leads to a duel. In a bizarre twist of fate, the socially awkward, physically clumsy Pierre actually manages to wound the calculating Dolokhov, and the aftermath is pure misery. Elena confronts Pierre, calling him a fool and demanding separation and financial security. Pierre, suffering physically and mentally, recognizes the relationship as abusive and agrees, acknowledging he has to end the lie.
So Pierre then seeks meaning in organized spirituality, turning to the Freemasons. This is his attempt to find a system to contain his chaos.
His involvement is immediate, almost desperate, but so is his disillusionment. He quickly notes the pervasive hypocrisy. Brothers not paying their dues, intriguing against one another, and many joining only for social advantage. He is searching for pure, altruistic truth, but he just finds yet another flawed human institution corrupted by ego and social climbing.
His encounter with the old Mason, Osip Alexeyevich, is crucial, though, because it reframes the entire quest for meaning.
Osip Alexeyevich corrects Pierre's focus entirely. He outlines the threefold goal of Freemasonry: knowledge of the secret, self-purification, and improving mankind. But the old man stresses that self-purification is the only goal truly under their control, and therefore the most important. He chastises Pierre for focusing on the improvement of mankind, while being personally impure. This is a foundational Tolstoyan lesson. Change starts from within, not from external organizing.
And this internal mandate, it kind of paralyzes Pierre.
Yes. He acknowledges the pervasive lie and untruth in the world, recognizing that he lacks the ability to take a serious, active part in life because he sees the fraudulence everywhere he looks. He is too honest for the hypocritical world he inhabits, and this honesty makes him inert.
Meanwhile, Prince Andrei returns from his spiritual revelation at Austerlitz, and he initially throws himself into bureaucratic service under the progressive reformer Speransky.
Andrei appreciates Speransky's rational efficiency, his dedication to creating order. However, his disillusionment is swift and symbolic. At a dinner, Speransky is seen laughing casually, and everything that had been mysterious and attractive about his intellectual reforming spirit is instantly lost to Andrei. He can't reconcile the profound reforms with the casual, human, laughing demeanor of the reformer. He expects spiritual seriousness, but finds only practical organization.
But his greater, more profound attempt at reintegration into life is sparked by Natasha.
His growing affection for her marks a shift away from abstract ambition and towards messy human feeling. He is moved to tears while listening to her sing, a complete reversal for the man who was bored by his wife. His feelings transition from passionate desire to a sense of pity for her feminine childlike weakness, which he couples with a heavy sense of duty and commitment. He finally sees value in the personal human world.
But this attempt at personal happiness is immediately challenged by the forces of duty and the rigidity of the old world.
The old Prince Bolkonsky bitterly opposes the marriage, forcing Andrei to postpone it for a year. This mandated gap in time proves fatal, as Natasha subsequently falls into a destructive entanglement with Anatol Kuragin, the morally loose brother of Pierre's estranged wife. Natasha, driven by that raw, untamed emotion we saw in her youth, cannot sustain the weight, and her mistake shatters Andrei's renewed hope for a normal life.
And then the storm of 1812 descends, and Moscow prepares for the French invasion. The personal dramas are suddenly just overwhelmed by historical events.
Alarm grips the city, rumors are rampant, the French are destroyed, the Russian army is defeated, the Tsar has departed. At the Moscow assembly, the nobility and merchants gather. When a speaker expresses readiness to fight, Count Rostov is so overcome with enthusiasm that he pushes Pierre, the previously inert man, to speak.
And this burst of patriotic fervor overcomes Pierre's characteristic philosophical hesitation.
Precisely. Pierre, swept up in the emotion of the moment, offers to supply and maintain 1,000 men, immediately matching Count Mamonov's huge pledge. He instantly regrets this massive, rash commitment. Tolstoy uses this moment to show how even the most spiritual and intellectual men can be completely controlled by the mass enthusiasm of patriotism, momentarily forgetting their philosophical rejection of the state.
As the Rostovs evacuate, Pierre stays behind in the burning city, determined to witness history or maybe find his death.
His time in Moscow is marked by utter chaos. He encounters a French captain, Rambal, whose life he saves. Pierre then witnesses the horrors of the burning, looted city, realizing the senseless debris of his world crashing down around him. He sees French soldiers looting, not fighting a glorious war, but engaging in base crime.
And Pierre is then captured by Davoust, leading to his ultimate profound philosophical transformation, mirroring Andrei's moment at Austerlitz, but going even further.
He is brought before a firing squad for being too conspicuous and attempting to intervene in a theft, and he witnesses the execution of 5 men. This experience strips away every intellectualizing layer he ever had. He realizes that the people executing him are simply instruments, Davoust, the adjutants, the soldiers. They aren't acting out of grand malice, they are cogs in a machine. He gains an inner spiritual freedom, realizing that the renewal of faith is not something he can achieve through effort. It is granted by grace and acceptance of suffering.
So the intellectual search for meaning is replaced by the profound wisdom of simplicity.
This is solidified by his encounter with Platon Karatev, the simple, good-natured soldier who shares his captivity. Platon is the moral and spiritual climax of the novel. Platon shares a story of an innocent man suffering unjustly and being ultimately redeemed, demonstrating that divine justice works outside flawed human systems. Platon's serenity, his simple love of life and acceptance of fate, helps Pierre embrace a new reality where the complex intellectual search for meaning is replaced by simple, good faith and the acceptance of suffering. He learns to love the life he has, stripped of status and wealth.
And this links Platon directly back to Princess Marja's spiritual clarity from much earlier in the narrative. They both found peace by accepting their limitations and turning toward faith, rather than fighting against their circumstances.
That's the key connection. Marge finds clarity and piety within the aristocratic structure. Platon finds it in humility and simplicity outside of that structure. They represent the two stable spiritual poles in a chaotic world. Pierre, the man who tried all the systems, society, philosophy, Freemasonry, finally finds truth through suffering and by embracing Platon's simple example. So, looking back across the entire Kansas we've explored, Leo Tolstoy utilized these intimate family dramas, the moral stiffness of the Bolkonskys, the passionate energy of the Rostovs, and Pierre's continuous, painful search for faith, to execute his most powerful commentary on massive national and historical events.
The structure is a masterpiece of contrast, really. We moved from the shallow political gossip of Anna Pavlovna's salons to the ultimate profound realization of spiritual truth, found only when the characters were stripped of everything and forced into simplicity and suffering.
And the central statements, the takeaways of this massive work, are crystallized in these experiences. We see the constant tension between societal performance and artifice. The elaborate choreography of the salon, Prince Andrei's initial empty quest for glory versus genuine, messy human emotion and truth.
And crucially, Tolstoy executes a radical interpretation of history, directly challenging the great man theory that defines the era.
Yes. The source material argues that war is not driven by the rational choices of great men, Napoleon's arrogance or Alexander's stubbornness. Tolstoy finds the motivation, millions of Christians killing each other over a diplomatic slight, to be fundamentally incomprehensible. Instead, the events are dictated by overwhelming mass movements, making individual actions often meaningless in the grand scheme. The destruction of both armies during the retreat from Moscow, for example, was caused not by genius strategy, but by the relentless mass movement of bodies and the simple laws of logistics and chaos.
And for the individual characters like Pierre, the path to true knowledge requires a massive internal shift, prioritizing self-purification over external reform.
True knowledge and self-improvement, as Osip Alexievich taught Pierre, require focusing inward self-purification and embracing suffering, not trying to escape life's difficulties. Pierre, by being stripped of his fortune, his wife, and his freedom, finally achieves clarity. This is the ultimate takeaway. The power of simple goodness and faith, embodied by Princess Marja and Platon Karateev, provides the only certainty in a world where everything comprehensible is deemed trivial. They demonstrate that peace lies in acceptance, humility, and love.
That is a profound lesson to draw from a story about emperors and battles. Pierre, who started as a social misfit and was constantly chasing external systems for answers, whether philosophy or social acceptance, only found his inner strength and spiritual clarity when he was utterly ruined.
A difficult, powerful truth that resonates across centuries.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to consider. Pierre eventually returns to society, marrying and attempting to live a normal life, armed with this newfound, profound spiritual freedom. What is the responsibility of someone who has achieved that level of inner truth? Is it harder to maintain that truth inside society, surrounded by the hypocrisy and corruption he once fled, than it was to find it outside in the isolation of captivity?
The difficulty of living simply in a complex world is perhaps the greatest challenge Tolstoy sets for his readers.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found some insight in this chaotic, beautiful, and profound world.
We'll see you next time.